The Quantum Group USA, LLC in California, DBA Quantum Distribution and Insurance Services. Advisors are responsible for following all insurance, DOL, FINRA, SEC, broker-dealer, and compliance officer approval requirements prior to distributing this information to clients. From our studios in Scottsdale, Arizona, this is the Quantum Policy Risk Podcast. Now, in this conversation today, we'll discuss several recent policy developments that are affecting retirement planning. While markets often get the most attention, government policy changes related to Social Security, Medicare, taxes, and retirement rules can quietly have just as much impact on a retiree's financial plan. And joining me, as always, is my fun-loving guest, David Duley, the founder and CEO of PlanGap. David, welcome back. It's always good to see you. What's going on with you?
It's great to be here.
What have you been doing lately? What have you been up to?
Trying to figure out what's going on in this crazy world.
That sounds like a big job lately. I mean, as we have this conversation
we don't
today.
wilt from big problems.
Good God. As we talk today, obviously, this is the middle of March. There's a lot going on, not just in Washington, but all around the world.
Exactly.
But I think when we talk about policy risk, a lot of people think about, the risk associated with retirement, but they don't think about policy risk. Think about market risk, there's longevity risk, all these other things. Talk about policy risk and why is that important?
Yeah, I mean, we all know when you talk to an advisor or advisors talk to their clients, they want to have an asset allocation to help offset policy risk and sequence of returns. There's also, like you mentioned, longevity risk. What if I live too long? Will the money be there for me?
Which used to be a good thing, living too long, but not anymore.
Yeah. I guess it depends how you're living in those last few years. And then medical risk, something happens to me and then it kind of derails or I require a bunch of capital to help pay for that. And then inflation risk, my dollars don't purchase what I thought they used to. And I think really we've lived through that, pretty aggressively over the past few years. But we think for a plan to really be complete, you have to look at policy risk. And when I say policy risk, we know the rules change by the government. I think we
really?
Lived through it, it's my guess. And I think we lived through a time that has highlighted that and the enormous power those rule changes can have on markets, on timing of investments, on the type of investments. And so that's one side, and that can drive some maybe market risk returns. But then you have what happens when the rules change on the programs that so many retirees are dependent on. What happens if the rules on Social Security change? As you know, there's a lot of concern about the solvency of the system. And there should be new numbers coming out, I think, in the next 2-3 months that's going to show that default date of Social Security where the trust fund becomes depleted is going to actually come closer about a year. So maybe 2032, 2031, I've heard. And so that's within planning distance here. And so a lot of people are worried, like what happens if that benefit's reduced? We also see the same thing in the Medicare world. Trust fund is also depleting. So a lot of these systems are going to have changes made. And it's not really if, it's how. And how will those changes affect your clients?
And certainly things feel chaotic right now with this administration in more ways than we can even describe, but it's not that policy risk is unique to this time period. I mean, it's happening all the time. It doesn't matter who's in power. There's always policy risk. So let's go back recently. What's been happening? What are you seeing that we really need to pay attention to?
Well, one of the first immediate things is Medicare and the cost of healthcare. And you've seen this cost of living adjustment happen in Social Security every year. There were a couple years where it was zero kind of during low inflation periods, but then there was recently, 2-3 years ago, it was like an 8% cost of living adjustment. Well, what we've seen over the past decade or so, or even longer, is Medicare costs or medical costs are increasing way higher than inflation. So Social Security has this normal inflation trigger on kind of general expenses. So let's say your Social Security goes up 3%, year over year, but now your Medicare premiums go up 10%, right? Because those are reassessed every year. The Medicare Part A hospital plan is reassessed, taken out of your Social Security check. So people have this false sense of getting an increase in Social Security that's immediately taken away by the Medicare costs. And people are like, wow, I actually have the same or less money with less buying power. And so there's this kind of slow bleed that's happening that I think a lot of people are really beginning to pay attention to. And they're like, wow, if this goes over a long period of time, I can see that not only are my Social Security benefits feel like they're not growing in today's environment, they actually might even be cut in the future. Where can I go to find some stability in my retirement income?
Yeah, and then let's talk about something a lot of people may not even be aware of, the term IRMA, which is kind of sort of a means testing. So you have rules changing on what your premiums are going to be, but based on your income. If you're a high income person, that affects what you're going to be paying for Medicare.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't factor that in.
Yeah, and so IRMA is income related monthly adjustment amount.
Love that name, by the way. Easy to roll off the tongue.
It rolls right off the tongue. And so what that is basically means testing. And it's means testing based on the amount of income you have, what bracket or what portion of the Medicare premium will you pay. What catches a lot of people by surprise is different events like selling a house, for capital gains, or selling an investment for capital gains that bumps your income, or, having RMDs all of a sudden bump your income can really affect your IRMA payments. And then and it can affect it for years, because I think there's like a 2-year look back on income. Right. So you have an event and then you're penalized potentially for the next few years because you're made more money that year. And so you get bumped up into the higher IRMA bracket. Those are, again, just things that advisors need to be aware of to be, in my opinion, more complete and credible in front of their clients. We know from the data. There was a recent big survey by Edelman. It's a big planning group and research group. And the top 3 concerns last year were all what I'll call policy risk related issues. And the number 1 was inflation, right? So monetary policy, and it's policy risk. 2 was cuts to Social Security. 3 were cuts to Medicare. You know where market volatility was? It was like 7. Outliving my money was like 6. Like, people are more worried about what happens with Social Security and Medicare than outliving their money. Because, and a lot of advisors are surprised by this, that if you have about $2.5 million or less of retirement savings, Social Security is going to play a pretty big role. Because ideally, if you've done the right things, you've saved that kind of money, even if you saved $1 million or $500,000, you're probably mid to upper income. You've paid a lot into the system,
right?
Maybe a dual income house. Then all of a sudden, if you look at the lifetime value of that income stream, it's a couple $1 million. And so when you look at that as an asset, where we see advisors really excel is they get in there and they say, wow, I'm going to talk smart about this. I'm going to address kind of these elephant in the rooms, and then I'm going to plan with my clients. So what we hear clients really resonate with is they just don't want their plan subject to political football.
Right.
They know rules are going to change. They know things aren't that great. They don't want to be caught off guard, so kind of now's the window to plan.
Yeah, and for advisors too, I mean, it's easy to kind of assume as a consumer that, you save all this money. Let's say you got a couple of $1 million and you start taking income and you got Social Security income, and this is like, let's set it and forget it and just sit back. But talk about some of the policy changes that can affect people who have kind of gotten there, they're taking income and can kind of catch them off guard.
Yes, I mean, some of the ones that are talked about right now, in fact, I was reading an article that this next election will most likely be the first set of senators that will have to deal with Social Security reform, that it could fall within that window of planning. And so if your average household is getting dual income household getting $4,000 a month, probably more financial advisor clients are getting $5,000, $6,000 a month from Social Security, depending on, again, when they turn it on, if they wait till sort of the maximum age. That's real money. If that's cut in half through a means test, like when you study the solutions, this idea of an across-the-board cut, grandma that's living 100% on Social Security getting a reduction, that doesn't seem real to me. But what does seem real is the government means testing. Those that have done the right things and saying, Mr. Smith, you have a couple $1 million. I know you're supposed to get $6,000 a month, but instead of a 25% cut, you get a 50% cut. Or there's been talk about, again, policy risks. Some of the solutions are for those higher earning families that there's no more spousal, support. And so, there's all sorts of ways out there that they're trying to fix the system, and the system will be fixed mathematically one way or the other. It just, again, how can we be proactive and smart to our clients,
So, and let's, go back again. I think this is what we talked about in the beginning, that most financial plans, most retirement plans, they don't really, factor in policy risk, and it's just because it's not talked about as much as it should be, which is why we're here today, which is why we have you on a regular basis. But this is something that is really critical as part of your planning, isn't it?
Well, we're entering the season that is becoming more and more critical because the math is the math is the math, and you're going to see more commercials, and it's going to be more top of mind. And I always say, if you look at the Social Security statement, they redid them a few years ago. About 5 years ago, the old green and white statements, remember? Like in that statement, it said these benefits are not promised, it's only based on the trust fund, and that can change based on government laws. And if we run out of money, we'll only be able to pay, whatever comes in out. And at that time, it was, let's say, 23% reduction. In the new statements, they basically have the same kind of disclosure, except it's a link now. Like they don't go into the paragraph, but the link gets you to a PDF page, and you can go to ssa.gov/there-for-me. Like you can type it right out. And it's a PDF that the government advertises, like, this is what happens when we run out of money. And I always say, this is bad marketing, you can't sell a car saying this is what happens when it doesn't start, and be part of. And so they're out there sort of seeding the clouds, as you will. I don't want to get into that, but seeding sort of these messages that things are going to have to change. And it's what we see in the marketplace dealing with clients is they just want their advisors to just talk to them about it.
Right.
Not ignore it. Just let's talk about what are the variabilities, so we're not caught off guard, we're not surprised. And then advisors can propose different potential solutions around it.
Yeah, and we've talked about this from a consumer point of view, and the advisor. This is where the advisor comes in. If you're thinking that you might be means tested and your benefits are going to be reduced, one possible direction, like, well, I better claim benefits now, which just kind of locks in the reduction pretty early.
Great point. And so you a little self-sabotage there, although I can't say with a crystal ball that isn't a wrong move, because if they're 100% means tested, maybe they got free money at that point. I don't think that's probably going to be an option, but you never know. But what happens when you claim early, and there was a study that something like 98.6% of people, if you have $30,000 or more of savings, should do everything they can to delay until age 70, unless there's some sort of health issue warranting some other reason, right? Because of longevity. But the reason is because, especially at least one person in the household do that, is because the bigger benefit survives for a married couple. And so if you can wait for that bigger benefit, the survivor will then be put in that place, right? And then that can go on, for as long as the survivor lives. However, if there's a 25% cut in the future, it's 25% off a bigger number, or whatever that means test, or whatever that reform might be. So you sort of set yourself up potentially for a bigger number. And that's where you can use kind of private market solutions to bridge up into that age 70 claim rate.
Which is why I'm going to talk about PlanGap and why you're building this company. One of the things, too, for advisors watching this, if you're having these conversations with your clients, this is a way to differentiate you in the market, because this is something that your competitors are definitely not talking about, right? They are concentrating on what they typically talk about, especially if they're focusing on accumulation. This is not something that they're going to hear very often, and it's really going to set you apart.
Yeah, I think it's a foundational conversation of any financial plan. It's like, how do we shore up an income plan, right? How do we understand our expenses and understand where the money for those expenses each month come from? A lot of it is Social Security. There's obviously other sort of lifetime annuities out there. But what we developed is kind of on the PlanGap side of the house, the first trigger that says, hey, if the rules change, you have an ability to get an enhancement on annuity that will pay out over time to help offset that reduction. And so what we know is people are looking for ports in the storm, right? And what we've developed is really a new lever, a new planning tool to say, we don't know what the future holds, but we have this release valve that in fact, if your plan is affected by these changes, we know where we can go in a very kind of conservative, cost-effective way.
Yeah, and it's an asset-based kind of strategy there.
Exactly.
I mean, in many ways, it's kind of the insurance you hope you never have to use, but at some point, if you do need it, it's there for you, and it solves the problem.
And what's neat about the product is even if you don't need it for Social Security, you can use the benefit for long-term care or enhanced death benefit. And so it's not just kind of a one-and-done thing. It's really a package that helps deal with a lot of the risks in retirement. And it just gives people that confidence that, okay, yeah, this is one of those risks. I have someplace to go. It's foundational. And, no one is out there really marketing a lot about private insurance products or insurance product solutions. Right. But you turn on the news, you go on CNBC, Wall Street Journal, it's always about Social Security and Medicare, right? And so the reality is, and it's always around costs or revenue and expenses and what that might mean to the customer. On Medicare, are they going to have to pick up more of the tab, so increase cost? On Social Security, are they going to run out of money and lose the individual going to lose revenue? And so we know that there are private market products that we can turn on income, right? And show that, wow, we can flip a switch if any of these things happen and you're going to be all right. Right. And we can protect your money in the short term. And so I think a lot of people, well, I know for a fact, because we've been doing this for years, all of a sudden have a whole new planning conversation with their clients. They're able to sell deeper into those clients because they're like, oh, I never really saw the use for this product, XYZ product. But now that you put it in the context of, wow, the rules changing on me from the government on something that I paid into or something that I'm going to have to pay for, Medicare, this makes a lot of sense to have something that I can flip on income or flip a lever to get access, liquidity, that allows me to adhere and prepare for those surprises that, look, man, we know are going to come.
David, you're a great friend and a great quantum partner. We appreciate that. If you'd like to learn more about PlanGap or David's hairstylist, reach out to David personally, but you can always call Quantum, because again, this is a conversation we have on a regular basis, because as we know, things change on a regular basis. The only thing that we can be certain about is that we don't know what the hell's going on tomorrow. But we appreciate you watching, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.